so much for coming to our Understanding Standards and Depth of Knowledge grades 6 through 8 webinar. Just some webinar logistics before we really get started. We want to thank the New Hampshire Department of Education for sponsoring this webinar series. We work in conjunction with them a lot to be able to get you information like this and anything data related, standards related, and everything in between. So we appreciate our partnership with them to allow us to bring you these webinars. Everybody is muted, so we can't hear you. If you could please ask your questions in the Q&A section of your Zoom screen, that will be super helpful. The Q&A is where Annie, myself, and Kate are going to be taking a peek at any of the questions that are had. So it'll be helpful for you to put everything right in that Q&A. The raising your hand is a little bit tricky in the webinar format, so we can try to unmute you and have you raise your hand at the end of the webinar, but it's a little bit challenging to do it in between. So anything in the Q&A would be great. You will be getting an email tomorrow with a link to the PD certificate, the link to the places where you can find any of the documents and the Google Slides and the video of this webinar. And then as we are finishing up this webinar, we will be, a short survey will come up at the end. We value your feedback, so if you wouldn't mind taking a few moments to be able to answer, I think it's 4 questions, we would appreciate that. If you have to peel off before the end of the webinar, the link to the survey will also be in the email sent to you tomorrow. Just a little bit about who we have on the webinar today. I'm Heather Jenkins. I work for Demonstrated Success. I will be doing part of the presentation today. We also have Annie Wallace from the New Hampshire Department of Education.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. We appreciate your time.
And we also have Kate McCaffrey, who is on the call. She is also from the New Hampshire Department of Education.
Yes, thanks for coming on this afternoon.
All right. So as we get started, our agenda today, we have, first off, we're going to be talking about your standards and just making sure that everybody's on the same page with understanding and knowing the standards. Then we're going to move into depth of knowledge and understanding a little bit more about depth of knowledge. And then we're going to look at transferring those particular skills to the classroom. And then we'll have a little bit of question and answer time if anybody still has some questions after that. So first and foremost, what the standards are is their expectations. Anytime we do work in any line of work, really, there are these expectations that shape our work. For us in education, our things that we are going by are those academic standards, those Common Core standards. And those are those set of expectations of what we want students to learn, right? There's a difference between what we're teaching and really making sure that students are learning it, right? We're not just teaching anymore. So these are those standards that make us know what kids need to know at each particular grade level for our 6th through 8th grade. Why we use them, right? They're really that framework, like I said, to make us ensure that students have the same expectation regardless of where they're actually going to school. So the standards help us identify where our learning and teaching priorities are at each grade level and knowing what our expectations are for all students. They help guide in the design of curriculum and any assessments that we do. And they all also help us ensure that students have access to the same learning goals and expectations. Like I said, anybody should all of your lessons should be around what those expectations are and what the Common Core is asking you to do at particular grade levels. Those standards, like I said, Common Core standards for ELA, Common Core standards for math, and the next generation science standards for science. Those are the main topics that we have here. So just to make sure that you understand what the standards and how they are set up, these here are the ELA standards. These are the standards for 6th to 12th grade. And we have within the standards what are called domains or reporting categories. Those domains and reporting categories are the big categories, like reading standards for literature here. We have reading standards for informational text. We have writing standards and so on and so forth. For math, again, the domains or reporting categories are those big domains of math. Right now on our screen is the number systems or ratios and proportional relationships. So we have our specific subjects and then we have our reporting categories. For science, we're looking at our reporting categories or domains of physical science, life science, and earth science. As we drill into those domains or major areas of standards, we have what are called clusters of standards. So right now, I'm looking at reading standards for literature for grades 6 through 12. And the clusters that are shown on this screen here are key ideas and details, craft and structure. There's also integration of knowledge and ideas, and a few others depending on which domain you're looking at. Underneath those clusters are the individual standards that relate to that particular cluster of standards. Same thing for math. We're looking at the number system right now, which is our domain or reporting category. Underneath that, we have our clusters of standards. So again, those major sort of topic areas within the number system, and then the individual standards that are related to those clusters. For science, it is a little bit different. The clusters are the disciplinary core ideas that we're looking at for science. So right now, we're looking at the domain of physical science, and within that, the disciplinary core ideas are listed, and those are your topic arrangements that you have. There's not really specific standards within that, but there's a lot of information about the skills and what students need to know within each one of those disciplinary core ideas or topic areas.
Okay, so we're going to talk about understanding and knowing the standards. So students can only gain this foundation when the curriculum is intentionally structured to a rich content knowledge within and across the grade levels. And we're going to talk about the staircase that goes up. So the first step is really providing the students with tools and foundational skills to support their learning. And then the next step is modeling and demonstrating how to make strong connections, summarizing, drawing inferences, and critically thinking about the text. You're going to support the students by having a variety of text structures, fiction and nonfiction, talking about author's craft, and really critically thinking about literacy. And the top step is really gaining those higher order thinking skills. With all of these steps, the students will build a foundation of knowledge across the fields that will give them vocabulary, background knowledge to be better readers across the contents. So we need each of these to kind of build success in literacy education. So there are 3 core standards that we're built in. 1 is regular practice with a variety of texts. 2 is reading, writing, and speaking grounded in evidence. You always need to go back to the text, always open up back to the text, cite what you need to cite whenever you're writing, speaking. That's very important that we always go back to the text. And the last one is integrating the knowledge across the disciplines, understanding the science, and when you're reading about science and social studies. So we have some career and college readiness standards, and these have those clusters that Heather just explained. And these are the standards that we expect students to know when they are ready to go to college or at the end of high school. But these standards are built intentionally as steps across all grade levels, which I will show you. There's key ideas. Oh, there we go. So the key ideas and details, you can see that that's going on in 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade. And what I love about this view is that if you are in 8th grade, you might have to go back down to look at what a student's doing and seeing if they need another foundational skill. And if you're in 6th grade, you may even have to go back down to the 5th and the 4th grade, because each one of these is building in complexity as you move up. So you have your key ideas, your author's craft, right? What is the author's story? How is the author structured? You're integrating knowledge across the text, you're writing, and then you're reading complexities. All of those, again, are like staircases building on each layer. Same with writing. You have the similar thing going on with writing. You have the text types and the purposes, the production and distribution of writing. Research is big right now, understanding how to use research in the middle school and present your knowledge. And then having that range of writing, being able to have different, why are we writing? There's opinion, there is narrative, there is factual writing. So that's really getting at the main purpose. So the first purpose is can you support your argument? Going back to facts, making sure that you have clear evidence to support an argument. Informative writing, can you write on a topic? Can you convey ideas? Can you use that author craft? Or narratives, can you use the author craft? If you're using informative writing, you're really going again back to those facts, understanding the main idea, the key supporting details, really structuring writing, which I'll talk about on the next page. So at this point, we really want to stress that writing has to have, a structure to it, and understanding that it's logical, it's got solid evidence, it's coming from multiple different sources, and that it's really being crafted in a style that's appropriate depending on the narrative. So what are we writing here? And if you're using research at this time, we're again going back to the text, the primary resource, and citing and making sure that we're making connections across content and across writing samples. Again, here's your writing standards. You have the 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade. And you have all of those topics that I just explained. You have, can you support an argument? Can you have your information writing? And then if you go to the next slide, you can have your narrative. So all of those. And then how does the author go about writing? How do we go about producing something? We're using the internet. What does it look like? We're going through peer review. We're going through the writing process of editing. Again, these are the standards, looking across at all, understanding how research is being built from 6th grade all the way to 8th grade. Can they draw evidence from literacy? Can they go back again, make sure that they're always pulling from a source or a primary source when they're writing. I love this one because it shows you how we build all of these from 1st grade all the way to 12th grade. So you have your anchor standard here, and then you have your 6th grade standard. And you can see that at 6th grade, we're now citing that evidence, again, going back to the text and drawing inferences from the text. But if you are not quite there yet, you might need to move back to the 5th grade standard. Can you accurately, from the text, explain what's going on to draw your inferences? And then you can see that each kid can be at very different levels, and that's why it's important to look at the whole picture of the standards.
For the mathematics standards, these are internationally benchmarked. They provide guidance and rigor in building both the conceptual understandings, the procedural skills, the fluency, and the application. So we want to build all of those together and not just have one or to teach them in isolation. We want to focus on the key concepts at each grade level, and we'll bring those in later. The standards are developmental progression and learning trajectories that provide coherence, so they link the topics and the thinking across the grades. And each key concept tends to occur over a 3-year period. First, it's introduced, and then it's worked on, and then it's secured. So the key concepts at each grade level. So in K-2, we're working on additive reasoning. So all the concept skills and problem solving related to addition and subtraction. Then in 3rd through 5th grade, we build on our additive reasoning to multiplicative reasoning. So we get the concept skills and problem solving related to multiplication and division of whole numbers, and we start introducing fractions. In grade 6, ratio and proportional relationships, that proportional thinking is the key focus, and we start introducing early algebraic expressions and equations, and expand upon that even more in 7th grade and build in the arithmetic of rational numbers. And finally, in 8th grade, we're really starting to set the foundation for Algebra 1 with linear algebra and linear functions. Achieve the Core has put together a nice progression of the standards K to 8. And what they have done is the standards were really written with that strong algebraic progression. And in staying with that algebraic progression, we have the green, the major clusters, and that they tell us what is really needed in building that algebraic thinking, algebraic understandings. Then we have the supporting structures that come in and help us. Those are the blue, sorry. And then the yellow are additional clusters, and this is not saying they're not important. These tend to be your geometry and your measurement and data and introduction to statistical reasoning. They don't play a major role in supporting role in the algebraic progression, but they're still important standards to know. And you can see how that progresses across the grade levels. So as Kate was saying before, I can see where they need to be in 6th grade, but depending on my students, I may need to go back a grade or two to scaffold in skills that they may need to be successful at the grade level. And then I may have those students that are ready to move ahead a little. So how can I look at expanding their knowledge and deepening the problems that really start tying into what comes after their grade level?
So for science, we have the next generation science standards. And for the most part, people are using the next generation science standards website, which is a really great resource. This particular link to the website that I have here is the mynsta.org website. It is also has the next generation science standards on them, but it's just set up a little bit differently. I find it really easy to navigate. These are the middle school standards for life science, earth science, and physical science. So these are those major areas that you're going to be working with. And then you would just click on this and it would give you all the information about middle school space systems. Or you could click over here and it could give you energy, and it will give you the whole synopsis of what needs to be done for all the different areas to be able to meet the standards for those particular topic areas. There's also ways to understand your standards through the New Hampshire SAS portal. There are what are called performance level descriptors that you can use to be able to understand your standards. There are writing rubrics. The modular assessments are a really great way to understand your standards. As you look at specific questions, you can see which questions are related to which standards to see if your interpretation of the standards is within the intention of what the standards are. And this is the link to be able to get to a lot of these particular resources, but I'm going to show you some of them here, and they'll be in the resources that you will get within the folder tomorrow. So these performance level descriptors, what these are is, again, they're resources on the Cambium portal or the New Hampshire SAS portal. And they're rubrics that align to the Common Core and the NGSS standards. And they help you understand what a student is doing at each level of proficiency for a particular standard. And they have them for ELA, math, and science. So here's an example of an ELA PLD. So on the left-hand side, you can see here is the standard that is they're referring to. And then they have the indicators up here below proficient, approaching proficient, proficient, and highly proficient. We're looking for students to understand and to be able to show their knowledge to the proficient or highly proficient areas. So you can see how a standard changes a little bit as we get to the different proficiency levels. Just find it a really nice way to be able to dig into those standards and maybe take a look at them in a different way than you ever have before. Same thing with math. This is an example of math that's listed on the left-hand side where the standard is, and then the proficiency levels above. For science, it's a little bit different. They have the level 2, level 3, and level 4. And then they have on the left-hand side your different topic areas and what's being done at the particular levels for those topic areas. I know that they're working on these performance level descriptors for science as well to make them just a little bit easier to understand and to decipher what students are doing at each particular area. As for the writing rubrics, these are really informative for anybody who is doing any type of writing, not just your English classes. This could be for your humanities classes. This could be for your science. It just gives you an understanding of what students are doing to be able to score in a particular way for the number of points. So these rubrics, there's 2 points for conventions. There's up to 4 points for evidence and elaboration, and up to 4 points for purpose, focus, and organization. So I'm not saying that you should necessarily get rid of your rubrics that you might be using already in your classrooms, but what we find is it's always good for teachers to take a peek at these and just make sure that your rubrics are encompassing what a lot of the things that are being looked at on the writing rubrics for New Hampshire SASC, because these are directly correlating with the standards that are for grades 6 through 11. For the modular assessments, these are all of the topic areas for the modular assessments. So up here are your ELA assessments. Then we have here are your math, and these are the middle school science. So you can see all the areas that you are able to really dig into and drill down into to be able to look at questions associated with those particular domains or reporting categories. So we have here, my one on the bottom is the major one, but the modular assessments are short. They're periodic assessments. They're related again and correlated with those New Hampshire SASC summatives. All students get the same questions, so it's great to be able to see where strengths and areas of need of improvement are. The questions are based on the Common Core. And again, you can look at a specific topic area or a specific domain, and you can match them up with your units. They can be administered anytime, and they can be administered at your current grade level or at the appropriate grade level for students. That check mark at the bottom is the big one, though. I really feel like as teachers use the modular assessments and start really digging into the questions and understanding the standards, they become more knowledgeable about what those expectations are for their particular grade levels. So this is just a general information. This has a lot of links for you as you get this information tomorrow. You can get into these slides and you can click on any of these links to be able to get to any of the resources that we just were talking about in the last few slides.
There are no questions at this time.
Thanks, Annie.
You're welcome.
Okay, so the next thing that we're going to be talking about is understanding depth of knowledge. I do see that somebody raised their hand. It is tricky to have us unraise your hand in the middle of the webinar. If you could at all try to get a synopsis of what your question is into the Q&A, that would be great, which looks like you did.
Here it is. Yep.
Yeah.
How do we get access to the progressions?
The progressions for the Achieve the Core progressions, I'm thinking that they're talking about. If they're talking the Achieve the Core progressions, the website is it's achievethecore.com, and they're in the resources there in their focus. It's the focus areas for grade level, I think is how it's listed on their particular website.
Right, and there's also a link on Achieve the Core to the math progressions, which are very in-depth, well-written documents housed at the University of Arizona.
Great. All right. So moving on to depth of knowledge.
So depth of knowledge is not about greater difficulty or things just getting harder or more steps involved. It's about the cognitive rigor, which means there's a lot of flexible thinking, seeing multiple possibilities or approaches, and being able to take on different perspectives as you look at things. So uncovering multiple perspectives or approaches to a problem means you have to really understand the concepts and have the skills and understandings to apply them broadly. So we can think of it as when we're starting to learn tasks as a beginner. So think about learning to ski, learning to play a musical instrument, learning to read, decoding words, learning to use math formulas. They may seem really difficult to do at first, but the more we practice them, we internalize the routines and they become easier and more automatic. But the DOK level doesn't change. There's still that depth of complexity, wherever you're at. So the more complex the task, a DOK 3 or 4, that requires students to really apply those memorized, learned, internalized skills and concepts in new and more complex ways. So it's similar to athletic teams learning and practicing the skills such as dribbling, shooting, passing, before they get to use them and apply them in games. And when they're in a game, then they apply them multiple ways as they interact with other people and with other situations that may come up. So the depth of knowledge is not a hierarchy like Bloom's taxonomy. And the reality is you've got to learn those basic skills and tasks before you can start really applying them and integrating them with more skills and understandings to solve and explore more complex non-routine problems. So the depth of knowledge, or DOK, is a tool that can help us to strategically scaffold learning for our students, so we can help them move from those basic understandings to really apply and work with the more complex, deeper understandings. Number of steps is not the determining factor of cognitive rigor. It is the non-routine nature that makes one think and really pull on prior learning and how can I apply things in order to solve this problem or in order to understand what this author is talking about in their reading. So for math, we can take a look at problems and we can say, what is the depth of knowledge? So first we want to look at what is the more routine problem. So if I look at B, find the surface area of a rectangular prism that measures 3 units by 4 units by 5 units. I just need to know how to find the surface area and I'm given all the dimensions that I need. Then if I look at problem C, list the measurements of 3 different rectangular prisms that each have a surface area of 20 square units. So there's a little more depth involved in the thinking here and what you have to pull on in order to answer this question. And then when I go to A, which would be a DOK 3, what is the greatest volume you can make with a rectangular prism that has a surface area of 20 square units? So not only do I have to know that I need the 3 dimensions, but now I have to start thinking about what will give me the greatest surface area of the 20 square units. And Robert Kaplinski has a nice set of matrices for the different grade levels, including high school. So those of you in 8th grade who may be teaching Algebra 1, you can pull from there. But he gives you a nice understanding of how you can see some of the different standards, how the problem changes as you move from a DOK 1 to a DOK 3. A DOK 4 mathematics typically tends to be one of the performance tasks that takes a day, couple days to really work through and solve.
So I kind of think that this is like, again, climbing up a hill, getting knowledge. You have to have each step as you move up to the top goal. And depth of knowledge in English language arts is something where you can have book reviews, discussions, and really get to some of these higher levels. But you have to start at the DOK1, which is, the who, what, when, where, why, and how facts. Being able to recall the information in the text is the building blocks. And then as you move up to DOK2, it's really a concept and apply. At this level, these words include interpret. Can you interpret what's happening to the characters? Can you infer what might happen next in the story? Can you classify, organize, collect, display, compare and contrast maybe two different types of literatures? Determine whether something is a fact or opinion. DOK3 is really starting to strategically think. This is where we kind of want to be working towards at this level. Can you ask and make connections? Can you support your thinking again from various different text sources? Your knowledge within the passage, always again going back to the text, and can you support what you're saying from the literature? The items may involve abstract themes, identification, inferencing across passages, even inferencing across fields of knowledge, and really, again, using their prior knowledge. What do they learn, and are they bringing their prior knowledge into the discussion? The DOK4 is really kind of where you're getting into your projects, really getting into one big main unit that you may be studying. And at this level, they're extending, they're integrating all of these skills, and they're using it to have a higher order thinking process, creatively doing a product, reflecting, adjusting over time. This would be a big finished product effort. On the next slide, I really love some of these other resources that I put here. Everybody often uses the web tool to kind of gauge their questions, whether they're designing or analyzing, but some of these other wonderful tools are available to you. Costa's levels of question really show you different ways that you can ask questions when you're doing literature, along also with the DOK flip chart. Those are both wonderful resources for you as you're planning to think about how you might use this in comprehension or when you're discussing literature with your students.
Karen Hess, who lives over in Vermont, has created a nice set of rigor matrices that incorporate both Bloom's taxonomy and Webb's depth of knowledge. So here are the links that will take you. You can see she's developed them for various content areas, recognizing that each content area has its own unique characteristics. And then we also have some sites that you can explore later that will let you see some tasks and problems that you can use to help your students learn to apply that deeper thinking and taking what they learned and then really practice applying it and expanding their knowledge.
Okay, I don't see any questions, so we're going to move on to the next, but definitely feel free to put them in the Q&A if you do have any questions regarding depth of knowledge. So we're going to move on now to transferring to the classroom. How are we going to do this and transferring it, what we know about depth of knowledge, what we know about our standards into our classroom in ways that are really effective for students? As we talk about student engagement and student learning and having students understanding what they need to be responsible for also in their learning is really, John Hattie has been transformative in this particular area. He talks a lot about visible learning and really has done studies on having students not only see like a learning target or something on their board. But when they really understand where they are in all of this and what they need to be doing, the likelihood of them reaching higher levels is much greater. So visible learning really has to do with how students can really understand what their portion of the learning is, right? We give them all of this information as teachers. We are teaching a lot of the lessons, and a lot of times students aren't really understanding how that fits into what their knowledge is going to need to be either at the end or how all these things fit together. So we have been doing a lot with having some learning targets and objectives so that students can see what exactly they're going to be doing in that particular day or week or over a certain amount of time. But it's also making sure that teachers are continuously going back to that and emphasizing it, not just listing it and having it just be something on the board for students to be looking at. And then it gets a little bit deeper than that as well, and really making sure that they're understanding what it is that these learning targets can be. So
often you take the standards to write your learning target, and you can use the I can statements that is typically being done in schools, or you can create targets or goals based on the standards. You might even want to break it down further where you have a target, then you have your I can. So maybe the target is I know how to cite evidence in text, and then the I can is I can use several pieces of text evidence to support an analysis of what the text is saying, as well as making inferences and conclusions. It's just really important that the students know what your target lesson is or what your goal is from the standards, and then how they can be responsible also and know why we're learning these important things. So the how and the why. Why are we doing this? So again, sometimes we change the language a little bit and we have the children take some responsibility. I know I'm successful when. So now you're changing this to the child's ownership. I know I'm successful when I can cite several pieces of textual evidence to support an analysis to say and be able to draw an inference. Again, you can kind of use these standards as the guide to support the student's learning. This is a checklist that you may use in your classroom where it will tell you the date that it was taught, the date that it may be retaught, and then maybe if you're using this in assessment. I had all of the standards, or actually I cans, on my classroom board. I had a visual so that the kids knew that this target was set on this date, and then this target was met as a class on this date. And we kind of went through each of the standards with the goal, and then we have successfully mastered that goal, and it shows them visually that we are tracking their progress.
So you can think of using the success criteria as an exit ticket or as a student self-reflection so that they can assess where they are at themselves. The slight change in wording, as Kate said, I know that I'm successful when I can, from just the I can statement, helps to put the ownership onto the student. So examples could be, I can recognize the Pythagorean theorem and know that it applies to right triangles only. And then I can use the Pythagorean theorem to find the missing dimension of a right triangle, or I know I am successful when I can. So you can see that the targets are building on each other, so that the final one would be, I know I am successful, or I can use the Pythagorean theorem to model and solve contextual problems. So they've gone from knowing the theorem and knowing what it applies to being able to find the missing sides to actually applying it to different types of problems. And then again, based on John Hattie's work, the power of students seeing the purpose or focus helps make the learning visible to them. They're not operating in the vacuum. They know what they're learning, and they know when they're successful, when they've been able to do these things. So checklists can also be helpful if using multiple ways to assess meeting a competency. So you can take the competency and the standards and break them into the basic skills and understandings, and then you can have a checklist with each student's name on it, or as a class, or as you're teaching in the lesson, so that you know and they know what they're knowing and where they need to work forward on from that point on. So supporting student ownership. So through the triangulation of data, we can construct an accurate picture of where each student is. It's not just saying, here's one test grade, here's one homework set that we've done. We want to see multiple points of data so that the students have time to show what they know and various ways in showing what they know. So evaluate what you value. Help students to see where they are at and where they are going, and they know the grade is based on the data, what they're working on, not just I got so many right out of so many right. And then tools that can help us in our planning. We have scope and sequencing charts. Many of the programs that we use or textbooks that we use may have them. Curriculum mapping is something that many of us are familiar with, where we map out our year, and it helps us with our pacing. It helps us what we know we need to develop and prepare for the students. Another way is assessment mapping. When we're doing our curriculum mapping, we know when we're assessing students, both formally and informally within our own curriculum, but sometimes, especially when we start at the middle school level, where all of a sudden we're as a team, we're not one teacher in a classroom teaching all the subjects to our children. We can kind of use assessment mapping to see where we are as a team and when we're giving assessments, so we're not overburdening students with 5 team members giving a major assessment on the same day. And it also allows us to see how our pacing is with the assessments in our classroom and with school and district testing that may be occurring. And then just the Universal Design for Learning, UDL, helps us to ensure that we're meeting the needs of all our students. So scope and sequencing that we can see. Scope refers to the breadth and depth of the content and skills that we're teaching. And the sequence is, how are we building one lesson upon the other to ensure that our students are making connections and building the skills they need to move on to more complex skills. Then we have our curriculum mapping, which is a little more broad than the scope and sequence, and is usually a lot more detailed, and includes our lesson plans, our activities, and our assessments. And then assessment mapping, again, is a way to ensure that the types of assessment are chosen are actually assessing what our learning objectives are. They allows for reviews of our assessment, especially over time, and ensuring that we're assessing what we wanted to assess and that we're assessing what we're teaching. And it helps to identify where are the crunch points for students as well as for you, and how can these be mitigated. Our assessment based on too many of the same learning objectives, or are we missing a learning objective that we had set out to teach and then we never check to see if the students really got it or not. And again, it works with a backwards design approach. What are the standards? How are we going to know when our students have met what we want to know based on those standards? And then how do we plan our lessons to ensure that our students get there, and what checkpoints along the way will we have? And then we can do the broad assessment mapping. So not only is it important to know what assessments we have and our students are taking, but it's also important to know what each type of assessment is actually assessing and what that data is used for. So our student data, it usually comes from all our classroom tests and assessments and what we see when we're listening in on student conversations. That really helps us plan and meet the needs of what all our students need. And then we have our checkpoint or benchmark trackings within the schools, such as iReady or NEWA or STAR. And we can take a quick look and see where our students are at. So it gives us a little bigger picture, and it may help us to say, okay, who are the students I may need to keep an eye on? Who are the students I may need to plan to enrich and deepen what they already have? And then we have our state assessments, which can give us a picture of our overall curriculum. So are we meeting? Where is it that we're maybe a little bit weak on or challenged in our curriculum? And it doesn't mean we're not teaching it. It may be how we're structuring the timing of when things are offered. So are we getting to things? Is there something we're always kind of rushing through because it's at the end of the year? So I know often geometry was like that. It was the last unit measured, so that was the one that appeared the worst on. So how can we take some of those geometric concepts and skills and embed them in other units to help the students learn? And things like finding area and perimeter can help with our addition and subtraction and multiplication and division. So action planning, we want to ensure the assessments are appropriate for the specific purpose. Are they assessing what we want them to assess? And will they give us the data we need to support our student learning, as well as being able for us to be able to tell where our students are at? We want to design or select assessments that align with that purpose. We want to make sure we're interpreting the data for the right purpose. And then PLCs or professional learning communities really can help to support the collaboration and those discussions either across grade levels in a specific content area or as a team. Are we seeing the same things in the different subject areas on our team with the student? What other supports may the student need besides academic performance supports? So we want to use our assessments to inform our teaching and learning practices. We want a bigger view of assessments like with the state assessment to take a look at, is our curriculum okay? Are we addressing what we need to address in our curriculum? Are we choosing good supports for our curriculum and for our student learning? It also can help give us skills in critiquing and revising our existing assessments if necessary. And it allows us to really get in and look at the current student understandings and make more informed instructional decisions, as well as just being more efficient and effective in the use of information from our district and state level assessments. So our goal with everything is the educational outcome being improved for our students?
So one of the other ways to really sort of think about our instruction is to use the Universal Design for Learning framework. So it's an approach, and it helps you think about your instruction, your curriculum, and your assessment. The basis of the Universal Design for Learning model is really grounded in neuroscience and looking at the brain and how students are processing information and how they are gathering information and how differently they do it depending on the student. So what this does is when you design your lessons in this way, it really takes the focus off of basically, this is what my classroom is. These are the constraints I have within my classroom, and I'm having my students come into that, and I'm having them change to kind of meet the constraints of and the demands of my classroom and the complexity and how I actually am delivering my lessons. And what it does is it actually takes a look at and really has you think about what are all the different needs for your students in your classroom, and how are you going to design your lessons to make sure that you're meeting the needs of those students, and not just trying to kind of put all your students into that sort of middle section, right? We've been for so long, the way that we know how to teach best for some of us is teaching to the middle. And what Universal Design for Learning does is it takes all those students that are on the outliers, and it really has you teach almost to the outliers, and then in turn meeting the needs of everybody in between. So it's a little bit different way of thinking, and there's some frameworks coming up here that can be helpful. So there's a lot of scaffolds and supports and needs that students have within the classroom. And as we know, with what's been going on with education and just in general with how we've been in and out of school and remote and not remote, the needs are ever changing. So this helps us really differentiate instruction. And we're thinking about the differentiation almost before it's coming. So we already have a lot of tools in our toolkit to be able to meet the needs and to differentiate our learning. And it, again, is working in that backwards design. When we think of UDL, or Universal Design for Learning, there are three areas that we are the major areas that we think about, and that is engagement and how student engagement is within your classroom. It also looks at representation and multiple means of being able to show what they know, and how we can also make sure that we are teaching kids in different ways so that they can understand it. And then that action and expression is basically helping students really understand and become a little bit more goal oriented and know, where am I going with this particular subject matter. CAST is the major organization right now that we have been getting a lot of this information out from. So the link is right here on the bottom. In addition, for UDL, they have some lesson planning guides. So this is just an example of a different way that you might be able to take a look at a lesson and redesign it. And making sure that we're looking at those goals and objectives. What are they going to be showing me? How are they going to be showing it to me? Is there choice in the way that they're going to be able to show me what they know? Or is it just one way? Right now in education, there's a push for students to be able to have choice in the way that they are able to show their understanding of specific information. So we really want to be keeping that on the forefront and making sure that we're giving multiple ways for students to be able to show their understanding, and really having that be flexible and allowing students to say, okay, I've got this portion of it, but I don't have this yet. So I get to try again and do this, so that I'm making sure that I am getting what I need to know, and I have more than one chance to be able to do that. Universal Design for Learning is also one of those things that as you are teaching, there are students that you come across year after year, or maybe it's just one year you find you have a student who has a specific need. So you do something in your classroom to meet the need of that student. But that's what you're going to do. You're going to add that to your toolbox and say, okay, this particular student, this type of graphic organizer that isn't the normal pencil paper graphic organizer. Maybe it was on a computer, or maybe it was another way for them to be able to brainstorm what they're going to write about. That then becomes a common thing that you use in your classroom, and not just for that one student that you felt like needed to have it. So as you're starting to plan your lessons and use this process, you start grabbing all of those things that you know that you might have used in the past, and you make them accessible to everybody at all times. Another area that can help you really understand your standards and your depth of knowledge, and maybe even how to meet the needs of students who aren't quite there yet, is what's called the Lexile Quantile Hub. It is a platform. It is another one of those online platforms that is the New Hampshire Department of Education has sponsored for every educator in the state of New Hampshire to be able to access those resources for free. So there's no cost for it. You go in, you log in as a New Hampshire educator, and you have access to this really interesting amount of resources when it comes to the Lexile levels. And even for now, quantile level is becoming something that's really on the forefront of math, and what level are students at for math. So for the Lexile tools, once you log in, you've got all of these tools that you can use. If you're looking to find a book for a specific Lexile level, what are we looking at for the Lexile grade level charts? You've got the career database, which is kind of interesting, specifically coming into the middle school and high school level, is what are those demands for specific careers, and what can we do within our particular grade levels to make sure that they're getting a lot of that information. They've got word lists, everything. For the quantile tools, there's a lot of that information, but now this is obviously going to be with a math focus. So you've got your math skills database. You can see what those skills are. You can type in this teacher assistant, a specific grade level standard that you're looking to maybe reteach in some way, or figure out a new and different way to teach it. And it will give you some specific examples of what you might do for lessons. Maybe there's videos attached to it. And when you're in that teaching assistant, and you're looking at a standard, it will give you all of the skills, and then it will give you also prerequisite skills that you can click on, and then also look at all of the resources that are available for teaching those skills as well. So it's a little bit of a game changer for math, for trying to make sure, specifically for prerequisite skills or even impeding skills, what's coming up next. I've got some kids that are there. What is something that I can do to maybe challenge them, or to show them things in a little bit deeper way? The links are right here. So once you have the presentation, you can click right on it, and it will bring you right to that Lexile Quantile Hub. And that's what we have for our resources at this point. We're going to be moving into the wrap up and question and answer. So I do want you all to think about if there's anything that maybe we haven't covered that you have a question on, or that you would like a little bit of better understanding of. Please feel free to put that in the Q&A. We'll give it just we'll probably stay on for another couple of minutes just in case there are any questions. The last webinar that we have in this series is for grades 9 through 12. So if you have colleagues or people you know that might find this interesting at the high school level, that is something that will be coming up on December 5th. And then again, when I close out, I'm going to quick survey will pop up, and we'd love for you to answer the questions. It will also be in your email tomorrow. I just wanted to get to the point where you could at least see our email addresses if you have any questions or general information. I am sort of the general information person. Annie Wallace is the math person, and Kate is the ELA person.
Yes, and please feel free to reach out to any of us for further help or support in anything.
All right. All right. I don't see any questions coming in.
One more. Was there a webinar earlier in the year for K to 5 grade bands? Yes, there is. There was one for K to 2 and then 3 to 5.
And yeah, Karen, I just wrote down your name, and I will get you the links. I'll show you where the webinars are. It's there's a couple of different places that I can give you the recordings on. It was K to 2 and then 3 to 5, and then I can get you the resources as well.
Right. And we're also working on putting the webinars and the materials up on the Department of Education's Canvas site, so teachers can also access it there.